Okay, next let's turn to House Bill 811, the Montgomery County delegation, presenting Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Delegate Vaughn Stewart. This is House Bill 811, a Montgomery County delegation bill. I'm pinch hitting for Delegate Lutke, who sends his deep regrets that he's not able to visit with us this afternoon. I did warn him, Mr. Chairman, that having me present the bill would dramatically reduce the likelihood that this committee would pass it, but he went ahead nonetheless.
You lost my vote already.
Yeah, no, exactly. I tried to warn him. So HB 811 authorizes the placement and use of speed cameras on Maryland 200, the Intercounty Connector. This bill passed out of the Montgomery County House delegation nearly unanimously with one vote in opposition. It only passed because several amendments were added to the bill that were intended to conform the bill to our committee's standards for speed cameras. And in actuality, as you'll hear, the amended bill actually goes far beyond what we normally require as a committee. So the bill as amended, number one, limits the number of cameras that can be placed on the ICC at two cameras. Number two, it requires the placement of cameras only in areas where MDTA determines that there has been a high number of accidents. Number three, it requires that any surplus revenue from the cameras be used to fund traffic, bicycle, and pedestrian safety projects on or near the ICC. Number four, it implements the Wyville Amendment by requiring the use of real-time speed monitoring. Number five, it requires MDTA to study the safety impact of the cameras and report its findings to our committee and to JPR by January 1, 2027. And relatedly, it establishes a 5-year sunset for the bill. The amended bill, of course, it does have a number of caveats. I think but it's still an extremely important priority for those of us who live or regularly drive in the ICC, because I live, less than a mile off of the ICC. If you regularly take this, especially outside of rush hour, you quickly realize that, especially since the pandemic, the ICC has essentially become a racetrack. It's basically like Talladega North, where folks are flagrantly and intentionally violating the 60-mile speed limit, and it's frankly unsafe. It's loud, certainly, but it's unsafe. There have been a number of times where either motorcycles or otherwise just negligent motorists have sped past me while I was even going, 5 or 10 miles over the 60-mile-per-hour speed limit. And so it's not safe. I think that this is a toll road where there's already cameras there to capture people's easy pass. And so I think that, the expectation of privacy on a road like this is probably a little bit less because folks are already, used to being monitored with their easy pass. And I think that having these two speed cameras is a small step towards providing some degree of safety and sanity on this racetrack of a road. And with that, I urge a favorable report.
Let the record show that Delegate Stewart has admitted in open public to violating the speed laws of the state of Maryland, no doubt in his great desire to emulate the great Barry Ciliberti.
Barry is indeed my mentor, and I'm just trying to appeal to the choir here. I sometimes you have to admit your flaws in order to make sure that your audience respects you and understands you.
Whenever I'm driving, I always consider Barry to be my spirit animal. Delegate Lehman has the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Stewart, I only heard at the very end where you mentioned, I believe you said 2 cameras. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct. A maximum of 2 cameras.
Okay, and whereabouts does the bill describe where those would be specifically?
There are not locations prescribed in the bill. Instead, it directs MDTA. And by the way, the bill is only enabling legislation. So if MDTA decided not to actually ever put cameras up, they wouldn't go up. But MDTA has to make the determination that if a speed camera is to go up, 1 or 2 or 0, any speed camera has to be placed in an area with a high number of accidents. And so that's the only prescription in the bill.
Hey, gang, I forgot to turn to the favorable witnesses. Mary, if you can put a pin in that, let me go through all of them and then go to the first.
I did have one other important question for Delegate Stewart, because I think sometimes maybe our friends in Montgomery forget that the Intercounty Connector is also in Prince George's. It's right next to my house as well. And so I would just, my question is, would the delegation be open possibly just to an amendment that includes some feedback from Prince George's on, I think there was some reporting or look back provision or something where I think Prince George's should at least be considered.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate Lehman. This actually, you'll be heartened to know, this actually is an issue that did come up during our delegation meeting as to the extent to which Prince George's should be involved with this. We actually debated it for 10 or 15 minutes about to the degree to which we should involve y'all. As someone I'm not actually the bill sponsor, so I don't necessarily want to bind the bill sponsor here, but I think certainly the Montgomery County delegation generally would be open to that sort of discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let me correct my mistake and go to John Becker, who's a constituent of mine, who's testifying in favor of the bill. John, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Barbe. Ladies and gentlemen, again, John Becker. I live in downtown Rockville, along with Delegate Gilchrist at the beautiful Americana Center condominium. And although I don't live adjacent to the ICC, I do use it and have used and continue to use it both morning rush hour, during the day, the afternoon rush hour, and I've used it on the weekends and evenings. And I can testify as far as a personal driving experience of the speeding and things like that. I think for Montgomery County delegation to propose and support this bill is a great start. I think this information that will be obtained from these 2 cameras, even though there should be more, I think this is a great start, and that data will be very important for all of us going down the road. And with that, I support this. I urge you all to support this. And Chairman Barbe, thank you for letting me provide my comments.
No, of course. Next, John Sang. John, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Barbe. I represent the Maryland Coalition for Highway Safety. In particular, I wanted to thank Senator Bennett Kramer and his colleagues in Montgomery County delegation, especially, as Mr. Stewart mentioned, Delegate Ludke, as well as Mr. Stewart, not only for his role today, but his sustained leadership over quite some time for roadway safety in Maryland. The Olney community where I live is one of the larger community footprints along the ICC in Montgomery County. Greater Olney Civic Association has made it clear that the IC speeds are a real threat, which is why they overwhelmingly approved their resolution to support the original bill in the Montgomery County delegation. The Easy Pass Maryland Transportation Authority data indicate average vehicle speeds of 67 miles an hour in a 60-mile-an-hour zone, more than 10% above the posted speed limit. And as Delegate Stewart shared earlier with his anecdote, significantly higher speeds a good deal of the time. Last week, I heard sirens on the road, so I drove out to see what's going on. A 2-vehicle crash with a pickup truck flipped around 180 degrees. Fire and rescue police on the scene. Why are drivers crashing on this fairly straight road? It's because of excessive speed. Why put rescue and law enforcement personnel in harm's way to enforce traffic safety and respond to crashes? We know that speed cameras work. After too many crashes and death, they're now working on Route 210 in Prince George's County, the same for I-83 in Baltimore. But we don't need to wait for higher average speeds and death counts on the ICC to justify 2 speed cameras. Finally, much of the ICC originates from out of state, so we need to send drivers from Texas to Canada, plus Marylanders, the message: when you get to Maryland, you get to the ICC, slow down, we care about lives here. So to you, Mr. Barbe, and your colleagues on the committee, please submit a favorable report for HB 811. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And next we'll hear from Christine Sang. Christine?
She just needs to unmute her mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Barbe and committee. Thank you for having me with you today. I live along Maryland 200, the Intercounty Connector. We've been residents for 23 years, and the ICC has been here for just almost 10 years. It is a raceway, just as Delegate Stewart said, it is a raceway. I can observe the ICC from the main floor in our house. Vision is everything, ears are everything. I can watch motorists and motorcycles speed past the other passenger cars and or trucks on the ICC. You can see their speed, you can hear their speed. It's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. Whether you're inside or outside, it is terrifying. We have toddler grandchildren who actually cover their ears when they're inside the house with the windows closed because it's a frightening sound. Additionally, I would say that favorable action for HB 811 is absolutely needed. And I would ask for your support with that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Also signed up against is Jonathan Miller, but he doesn't want to testify. So a number of people had their hands up for questions, and I did interrupt Delegate Lehman. Do you want to ask a question, Mary, or are you good? Well, I'm going to assume
I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah, I finished, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Delegate Holmes has the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just kind of wanted to follow up on Delegate Lehman's question in reference to Prince George's County, because this is an ICC, Intercounty Connector. You did mention that the Montgomery County delegation discussed Prince George's County. Am I to assume, based upon this legislation, that the cameras will be placed someplace only in Montgomery County, or what kind of assumptions should I be making with this legislation?
Yes, Delegate Holmes, thank you for the question. My recollection, and again, it's not my bill, so I don't want to bind anyone, but my recollection of the resolution of the discussion we had in delegation was that the expectation is that the 2 cameras would be placed on the Montgomery County side of the ICC, which my understanding is that it's about 95% of the ICC is within Montgomery County.
Okay, and just to follow up, Mr. Chair, I left Cleveland, Ohio, and went to college in Tuskegee, Alabama, and I learned a couple of things down there. And in the admission of Delegate Stewart of his going past the speed limit, I would say to you in the vernacular of Alabama, bless your heart.
Thank you, Delegate Holmes. I have to admit, Barry is just rubbing off on me in all the wrong ways. Now he has a question.
Yes, that's right. Delegate Ciliberti, unmute yourself so you can answer your question or ask your question. Barry, you need to unmute.
I'm done. Yes, thank you. First of all, I should know this as many times as I travel the ICC, but does anybody know how long the ICC is lengthwise, miles-wise?
That's a great question. For some reason, the number 17 immediately comes to mind for me, but so it's something around that, but don't quote me on that precisely. One of my witnesses may know exactly, but I would say somewhere in the high teens would be my guess.
Or just as a footnote, if you happen to be traveling the ICC and you may be doing 75, close to 80, you may look in the rearview mirror and you'll see a 4-wheeled wreck driven by Wyville that will be overtaking you. So you have to be very careful.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. And I don't want to make too light of the situation, because I mean, as Christine said, I mean, beyond the times that I've feared for my life, and I oftentimes travel with my toddler in the back seat, and the sounds even when you're on the road are terrifying, but they're terrifying even living nearby. I mean, it's basically this kind of haunted lullaby that everyone within a few mile radius of the ICC just has to endure as part of living nearby. It's just an absolute ever-present sound.
So am I to understand that the 20-foot walls don't cushion the sound, or?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. There are these sound barriers in different parts of the ICC, but my understanding is that they went in under the assumption that the ICC would be 55 miles per hour. It was then raised to 60 miles per hour. And then, of course, as we've heard, people regularly go 75 or 80, and the walls were just never designed for those sorts of speeds.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But I appreciate the warning about Delegate Wyville. I'll certainly keep my eyes peeled on the rearview mirror.
Indeed.
Well, I think Delegate Wyville can draw some comfort in the fact that now he has entered the vernacular of the committee when you refer to the speed camera reporting function as the Wyville amendment. So
just don't ever let Delegate Ciliberti ride as a passenger in your vehicle, because he is constantly nagging you.
I see. Okay, Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Delegate Stewart, did you read the information letter from MDOT on the about extending the funds? It would violate the trust agreement, et cetera. Do your amendments address that? I guess that's my question.
So it's a great question. I have to admit, I'm usually a voracious reader of the entire bill file of a bill. But in this case, since it's not my bill and I only learned I was going to give the testimony a few minutes ago, I actually have not read the letter. I'm happy to do so, but I trust the judgment of the subcommittee to work out any remaining issues if the amendment don't resolve them. And also, by the way, Patrick Tracy just let me know 18.8 miles long. So I was not too far off.
You are not.
Right. Well, anyhow, there's reference in the information letter from MDOT that should MDTA funds be expended on the installation of these cameras, it would be in violation of the existing trust agreement. So I'm just wondering if you noticed that. But we'll take it up in subcommittee. You've been doing a pretty good job so far on presenting it. So thank you.
I appreciate that very much, Delegate Weibel, and I'll make sure Delegate Lutke knows you said that.
Okay. Delegate Parrott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's interesting. Like you just mentioned how the speed limit was increased when they opened it from 55 to 60. You might know that the reason it was increased was because Delegate Aruna Miller, who's now running for Lieutenant Governor, and I introduced a bill that said it should be 70 miles an hour. And the day of the hearing, the MDTA changed the speed limit to 60 to take our, the speed out of our bill. I guess before I could support this, really that it should be 70 miles an hour. Engineering studies support that. Would that be an amendment that you would agree to? If we're going to have cameras, we should have a reasonable speed limit on the road.
I wouldn't agree.
Please don't make me have to sit through another Montgomery County House delegation meeting.
I know. Yeah. First of all, I don't really want to entertain the hypotheticals because, again, it's not my bill. So I don't really feel like I can even make any commitments. I would just say that I disagree with the idea that 70 is safe. I would say, however, that if we could guarantee that every single driver would go 70, then the road would be a lot safer than the status quo. But the reality is that folks go higher than the speed limit, no matter how high you ramp it up. And I think if we moved it to 70, we'd have a lot more people going 85, and we already have way too many of those as it is.
Yeah, here we're saying studies show that people tend to go what they're comfortable with, not what the speed limit is. And so they'll continue to go what's comfortable. And actually, if you raise the speed limits to a reasonable amount, oftentimes people drop their speeds because they feel that it's actually a reasonable speed limit. However, I do hear what you're saying, and I just wanted to point that out, that Delegate Aruna Miller and I did put in that bill, and we are thankful that it's 60. I think it should be higher. And I think to enforce a very low speed limit with cameras is kind of overkill. And it seems like another problem there may be that some of these speed barriers have not been designed effectively, and that might be another avenue to take too, to go to
you mean sound barriers?
To fix those speed barriers.
Yeah. Thank you, Delegate Parrott. And I would the only thing I would add briefly is that I am familiar with those studies that people basically drive however fast it feels like it's safe to do rather than what the posted speed limit is. And I think that really is even more reason that we need to try to keep folks at bay with these cameras, because the ICC feels like a road, at least to me, that you can go really fast on. It's straight, it's wide, there are huge shoulders, and I think clearly a lot of motorists feel the same way too, which is why folks are going so fast. But I also want to make the point that when we're talking about these folks that are speeding on this road, we're not talking about the run-of-the-mill driver like Delegate Siliberti that's going slightly over 65 or 70 miles per hour. We're talking about folks who have come up in our committee before that are doing this as a game. They're doing this as a hobby. They're doing this for recreation. And by this, I mean exceeding the speed limit by 20 or 30 miles per hour, at least. So yeah.
The road was designed for 70, but
okay, asked and answered. Delegate Healy. And you're muted.
Yes, okay, thank you. I wanted to I was here when we passed the original speed camera bills, and it's my memory, if it's correct, is that having the speed to get a camera, you have to have the speeds at what the road was designed for. I think that we had a lot of debate about this in the committee back then, And I think that was in the bill, that in order to get a speed camera, you had to have reasonable speed limits. And so we'll definitely look at that in subcommittee. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that it's 12 miles per hour over, I think is the usual standard for these cameras. So I think here, you'd get a ticket if you were going 72 or 73. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions, so that will conclude the public hearing on House Bill 811. Let's proceed